Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress Free IEP, the show where we help families build their village to raise their neurodivergent children with confidence and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent, walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on the professionals, resources, and real world strategies that can empower you to navigate the IEP process and beyond without stress. Whether you're tuning in live on Facebook or YouTube or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we're so glad you're here. Let's dive in and meet today's amazing guest. Today's amazing guest is Gabrielle Czaja, and she's a physical therapist, and she has been on the show before, but I am really excited to have her on because we are talking about neurosensorimotor integration and reflex integration. So Gabrielle, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Francie. It's great to be back and good to see you again.
Good to see you too. And so why I'm so excited, as most people know, my daughter has been seeing you for 2 years. I think it's been 2 years already, I think. And I attribute a lot of her growth and emotional regulation and where she's doing to the work that we do together with her. So I'm excited to get this information out there because I talk about it often and people always ask me, well, what is it? I'm like, I don't know how to describe it. Just, you got to go. She's great. So let's jump in a little bit about the work that you do and why it helps with the emotional regulation.
So thanks, Francie. As a physical therapist, I have training. I'm a core in training with the Masgutova method of the Masgutova Neurosensorimotor Reflex integration. A lot of words, we'll simplify that today. But what we know is that our primary postural and developmental reflexes are the building blocks, not only for growth and maturity throughout the lifespan, beginning in utero, through infancy and up on up, but they're also important. Integrated reflexes are also important for protection and survival.
Right, which is important. Like our PDA kids that are always in fight, flight, or freeze, this helps with that.
Yes. So reflexes are an example of a reflex. I think it's easier to give some examples are the grasp. So if you make a fist with your hand, this grasp is not only holding on to mom or dad's or grandma's hand, it's also holding on in the context of perseverance. It's also the building block. Even though this is a closed hand, this is what also begins to develop fine motor control. So the grasp reflex is the foundation, not only for physically holding onto a hand, holding onto a plate or a cup, turning a key in a lock, using utensils, but also grasping a concept. Do I comprehend the situation, what I'm understanding? Can I hold on in terms of perseverance? And then for kids that are so inclined, it's also the grasp that allows us to develop more sophisticated movement patterns, such as playing the violin or playing the piano.
And it's so interesting because that's why I say, I'm like, I can't tell you, this is what we do. I don't know how it relates, right? And all I know is it works, right? So what is, like, with the Masgutova method, like, what are some of the other things that, like, I understand with the perseverance, that the grasp, what are some other things that what you do helps with, like, the emotional regulation per se, or things like that?
Yeah. So the way that, first of all, I should say that a lot of people in the field of pediatric occupational therapy, physical therapy, pediatric health in general, we often think about reflexes as needing to be suppressed. Svetlana Masgutova did her research back in the 80s and discovered that it's not about suppressing a reflex, but when a reflex is retained, it often means it's not integrated. So what we do is we do very gentle movement patterns based on sensory input as well as movement input to help that reflex, for example, the grasp, become integrated. The first rule of thumb in any therapeutic situation is always safety. Children need to be safe to learn. Adults need to be safe to learn and work and thrive. So one of the most important things that we want to do with a child that needs some reflex integration work is to create a sense of safety. How do we feel safe? We feel safe, what I like to call neurological safety, which is our brainstem understands that we're in a safe place. So we can be in a safe home, be in a safe neighborhood, be in a safe school. But if there are some neurological glitches, and they can be very minor, it doesn't have to be a lot, then it's more easy to be triggered, to act out, to have behavioral issues, to avoid, to have excess muscle tension, to have not enough muscle tension and not be able to sit up tall. So we use the concept of how do we help this child feel safe and at home in their body and help them experience the locus of control or agency from the inside out.
Right. Which is so important. And I know we've had this conversation and there's such differences about fidgets and how you're like, yeah, right.
I knew you were going to bring this up.
Of course.
If you really want to get into fidgets now, but yeah. So go ahead, ask me your.
No, I was just going to say that fidgets that you're feeling is that that's using something external versus being able to do it internal.
Yes. So I think that the need for a fidget is simply a signal that our self, brain, body, soul, heart, mind, our self, capital S, needs some help in feeling safe in the world, or needs some help in not feeling overwhelmed from a sensory perspective, right? There is a reflex that is important for calming down the body so that we can see and also sit and do desk work. And that reflex is called the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. Kids that prefer to sit cross-legged on a chair, kids that don't want to sit on a chair, kids that wrap their legs around a chair, okay? This reflex is important not only for sitting and being able to concentrate and do their work, it's also important for feeling safe and protected out in the world. And so if a reflex isn't integrated, such as that one, somebody's going to be fidgeting and a kid's not going to be able to sit still. So sure, we might say, okay, they've got a lot of extra energy. How do we help this kid with extra energy settle down? Well, we give them a little pop-it thing. We give them something to put in their hands. That's fine at age 5. I just wonder what, and again, I'm not an expert on this in terms of the fidgets things. I'm just asking the question, what is this child at 5 who needs this to calm down and a toy or a stone in their pocket going to be doing at 15?
Right.
And then at 25, if they're in an interview for their first job. And then what are they going to be doing at 45 when they're giving a big presentation? So I'm thinking in the long term, how are we setting up a child for success, not only in the present, but also in the long run? Because reflexes are the building block for lifelong growth and maturity, and then also survival and protection. So I'm just not sure that that's the best or the only solution.
Which makes sense. It's funny because what came up to me is that when I was in law school and I would do law school exams, all that anxiety and nervous. And so I would always walk. It was 1.5 miles from my house. Yes. And I would always walk because that would get out the energy, the nervousness, and talk to my mom because she's amazing. But, but that walk is a way to dispel the energy so that I could get in and sit down for a 3-hour exam, because it's not like you can get up and walk around during a law school exam.
That's right. And actually, I think that could be an example of what we call positive protection versus negative protection. So that's what we would call a mature response to a normal stressor. And reflexes are there to help us have positive protection. If our reflexes aren't integrated, then, for example, if the grasp reflex isn't integrated, we're going to have an inefficient grip on a pencil. And that could start to lead to tightening or gripping, not just in the hand and the wrist, because, kids are going to try, they're going to do their best. They want to do their best. But the postural collapse might start to happen. Crunching down, lots of effort in their hand and their shoulder. A 10 or a 15 or maybe a 20-year-old isn't going to notice that. But let me tell you, I see plenty of adults who have neck and shoulder pain, and I can see that they don't really know how to hold a pencil.
Yeah.
So positive protection is what comes from a reflex being fully integrated. So as an adult, you recognized your stress, and in response to that stress, you were able to choose a very constructive way of navigating your stress and settling your body.
Right.
And a negative protection might be to completely pretend that everything's okay, and then
Which
get into the room.
Many do, right?
Well, yes, because nobody wants to be vulnerable, right? It's scary to be vulnerable. Or you might have had an extra cup of coffee thinking that that would settle you down. You might have been chewing gum really, really loud and disrupting not only your ability to concentrate, but maybe people in the room. So what we want to do with kids is help them develop the foundation for maturity and growth from a safe space.
Yeah. And so I hear reflexes. I'm like, well, aren't reflexes reflexes? Isn't that something you're born with? But it's not, right? Like the integration.
We are hardwired. Human beings are born with it's astounding, an amazing array of sophisticated brain body functions. And there are movement patterns associated with both sensory as internal as well as external stimuli that serve as the building blocks. So we've been talking about grasp. We talked about a reflex that helps us sit to do desk work and concentrate. One type of a simple reflex is the reflex that has us immediately, let's say we inadvertently touch a hot plate and we pull back. That doesn't go through our brainstem. That does not go through our brain. That's a very simple kind of reflex arc that's happening at the level of the spinal cord and does not require cognition in order to say, oh, my finger's getting hot. Oh, I'm about to develop a very severe burn on my finger. The body knows how to protect itself with that. The developmental and postural reflexes are movement patterns that we witness in utero and then during the first 2-3 years of life that help us to process hand-mouth coordination, hand-eye coordination. Writing is related to playing the piano, is related to turning a key in the lock, using utensils, and then more sophisticated things, as we've been talking about with the grasp reflex. So these kinds of reflexes are more sophisticated, and they're happening in what a colleague of mine calls the downstairs brain, right? The brainstem. The brainstem is where a lot of our automatic functions happen so that we can be out in the world and be human beings and do what we love to do. The executive control center, which is what a lot of kids with attention deficit, a lot of kids that are autistic, a lot of kids that display different kinds of neurodiversity, the connections are not as easily accessed in some of these kids. And so the goal is, how do we maximize the connections between what's happening in the upstairs brain, what's happening in the downstairs brain, what's happening out in the world, and then in between other human beings. So if we work with simple movement patterns to help the reflexes that are necessary for not only maturing and growing, but also protection, then we're strengthening those neural connections between what we might call the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain.
Right.
So what I start with, we've been talking about safety a little bit. What I start with almost every person, adult or child, after we've done an assessment, is I will often do what we call tactile integration. And you've witnessed this. I think we've even done a little bit with you.
Yes.
But tactile, there are 11 different kinds of receptors on our skin, and they're responsible for deep touch, for light touch, for vibration, hot, cold. And so tactile integration is a very gentle, whole body way of helping a child feel safe in their own skin. Now, some kids and adults actually are quite sensitive to touch. There are some kids and adults that don't like to be touched. So to a certain extent, that's okay. But if there's too much overprotection, we would say negative protection would be, don't touch me. We need to find a middle ground, because our skin and our ability to be touched is part of our protection in the world. And if it's hard to have certain kinds of contact, then it's hard to grow, and it's hard to mature, and it's hard to thrive. So yes, we can just say that, well, they don't like to be touched, and then move on, and then never touch that child. But we're kind of leaving that kiddo behind, because we're not giving them the benefit of, well, how can we strengthen those connections between the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain so that kiddo can have some kind of level of touch so that they are more protected and they have more capacity to grow and learn and thrive.
This just brought up so much stuff in that what you do, it's not behavior modification at all. It's not ABA therapy in the sense of, oh, we need to force this child to learn how to accept touch. And so we're going to keep touching them until they desensitize. And that's not, because you're going from, right. And you're going from the internal. And it also brought up, I'm thinking about all of my kids, clients that we have in their IEPs that they need the squeezing. Well, that's telling us that reflex, that what you do is what they need, and their body knows it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And, it's interesting because I had a young man, I started seeing him in high school. I think he was 16 or 17. And when we first started working, he could handle what we call embracing squeeze, which is just a very gentle, slow, deep kind of pressure touch on his arms, shoulders. I'm going to stand up. But when it came to working with his hips, no, it was too sensitive. So what I would do is I would say, okay, put your hand on your hip, and then I'll press deeply on top of your hand, right? And over time, he became able to tolerate deep touch to his pelvis, to his shoulders, eventually his back. And again, that it's not, reflex integration is not the same as, well, if I do 3 sets of biceps curls this week at 10 pounds, and then over time I can do 20 pounds, I know I'm stronger and I know I have more definition. Reflex integration doesn't show its benefits in quite that direct of a way. But what we know is that we have to feel safe in our body. We want our reflexes to be as well integrated as possible. So we can infer that if a child can tolerate more touch than where they started, there's no measuring stick. But if they can tolerate more, if their reflexes are a little bit more integrated, we can infer that they're going to function better in the long run. if that makes sense.
It does, because I'm thinking about the work you've done with Hannah and how, like, at the very, very beginning, and she wouldn't, like, certain positions would trigger her, and then she'd be out hiding in the corner and not, but then with her work, like, she doesn't do that anymore. Like, rare occasion she will, but for the most part, like, I think it's the work that you've done that's gotten her comfortable in her body and accepting of the work that you continue to do.
Yes. And a large part of that, Francie, as you know, is because you guys were consistent with your home program.
Yes.
When Hannah would sort of experience a certain kind of stimulus, whether it was an ask to do a certain kind of activity or tolerate a certain kind of movement, we had the two of you do certain things to help her feel safe. So she did few things, right? Like when we talk about Rocky, she did a few things that over time helped her feel safe. She doesn't need that much anymore, does she?
No,
you guys, it's like, so she feels really, really safe, much more safe than she used to. And that makes it possible for her to expand her repertoire as far as activities out in the world, as far as engaging with people out in the world.
And it's also for her when, she co-regulates with me. We know that. But she doesn't need to with me as much. She's learning how to regulate on her own.
That's right. And, I just want to tell this little vignette because, and someday, Francie, we have to hope that Hannah in her 20s, 30s, and 40s is going to be okay with the fact that we're having this conversation.
Yes. I have asked her, though. And she said it's okay. So
she came in recently and was kind of grumpy. It had been a rough week. I'm thinking it was the Halloween candy. Who knows? The full moon, whatever. She was just not quite settled. And also, she told us she had that great funny joke. I don't know if you remember this, but I had this elephant watering can and it was in the corner. And so she said, how come nobody's talking about that? And you and I are like, what are we talking about? And she's like, the elephant in the room. I mean, and we all just burst out laughing. And that was a really great example of how she just wasn't having a great day. It wasn't a bad day, but she was feeling stressed. And also she was still able to tap into that other mature part of her that could be present, notice her surroundings, and even go so far as to make a funny joke. So that was an example of her in a very sophisticated way, being able to kind of hold both, I'm feeling a little bit out of sorts, and I can have a mature, positive protection response.
Right. And it's funny that you say that, because it's humor is, and she wanted me to tell the story, so I'll tell it now, of when I learned humor with my father when he was angry. My sisters and I were messing around in the car, and it got to the point, like, dad was like, that's it. When we get home, you're getting spanked. He goes and spanks one sister. He comes into my room, and there I am, bent over with my skirt over my head, my tushy in the air, waiting for my spanking. And he walked in and just busted out laughing. Right? Busted out laughing. I never got spanked. I started crying, like, why didn't I get spanked? But I learned humor can dispel all that anger and all that other stuff. And it was just so fun. So she wanted me to tell that story. It was, she loves that story. That's what I learned with my dad. When he gets pissed off, make a joke. And that's great. Right? That's great. So she knows using humor. And it's interesting because I'm thinking about another client, and we were talking at an IEP meeting, and the principal was saying that when she goes to get him, he won't go. But when she goes in and goes, mate, it's time for us to get going, he laughs and gets up and goes.
That's right. He feels safe.
Yep.
He feels at home. He's feeling relaxed. Yeah. So how do we set up the conditions for every single one of us so that more often than not, we can respond from that place of safety and feeling at home in our body, so that we can function. I mean, the world is getting more and more stressful.
Yep.
We are, we're really learning so much about what both the benefits and the harms are with all of the digital devices that we have at our hands. And so how do we find that middle ground to respond to the stimuli in the world and at the same time be able to function without feeling so overwhelmed? You know, it was so interesting. I think you probably saw these headlines in the newspaper a couple of months ago, or no, just a month ago, that there's a school system in Kentucky where they now that they don't have access to their phones from bell to bell, morning to afternoon, recess is noisier and hundreds more library books are being checked out. These are the kinds of activities that a kid left to their own devices, without the digital devices, pardon the pun there, but these are the sorts of things that certainly, showing my age, I didn't have any of this stuff in the 60s and 70s. We know how to play.
Right.
We know how to learn if we're just given the opportunity in the environment.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's great. So the schools are starting to shift a little bit. You know, I think more and more parents are recognizing that more safeguards, more guardrails need to be put on the digital devices. And also we're discovering that, you know what? Leave a kid in the yard, let them play on their own, let them run around the neighborhood. And these are the kinds of things that children need to learn and feel safe. Again, that's part of the inside out learning.
Right. Yeah. And it's, my kids say often, I'm bored. I'm like, good. You need to be bored every now and then, right? It's like, but I want more tablet time. No, you're not getting more tablet time. Let's figure out something else to do. Right.
That's right. That's right. And a little bit of boredom is fine. Now, if a kid's bored day in, day out, they're not interested, then we start asking questions about what else is going on, right?
Right.
But yeah.
But
no,
yeah,
a little bit of downtime is not a bad thing.
Right.
But a lot of kids are afraid of being quiet. And, it's interesting because in addition to doing the reflex integration work, as you know, I'm also an Alexander technique teacher. And the Alexander technique is very much an upstairs brain kind of intervention to help what I might say to a 5-year-old be the boss of your body, and to a teenager learn how to negotiate with the available energy you have on any given day. And what I have discovered is that a lot of kids don't know what it's like to be quiet.
Yep.
So they interpret quiet as something wrong and something fearful. It's scary when there's quiet.
Yeah.
So when I saw that more kids are checking out more books out of the library, kids are discovering that sitting and reading a book, even if it's just for 15 minutes, that's 15 minutes of quiet, of when they're engaged with themselves and their own imagination and their own body, that otherwise would be spent outwards, taking away from themselves.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It makes it adults don't do it enough.
Well, even adults,
right?
We adults, I mean, I'm just as guilty as the next person. We adults have a hard time putting our phone down before bedtime, right?
Right.
Yeah. So with the Alexander technique, I don't know if this happened with Hannah, but it certainly has happened with plenty of other kids. I had one little girl many years ago come in and say, well, I know the ready list is helping me, but I don't really like to do it. Like she could tell it was doing something for her, but it left her feeling a little unsettled. And then over time, she got used to being able to stop and connect with herself and connect in the world in the way that gave her a little bit better postural awareness, a little bit more grounding, being at home in her body, and then being able to engage with the situation at hand.
Right. No, I love the ready list. I use it all the time. Hannah won't admit it, but she does use it often.
And Hannah is now at a point where she chooses to use it. and more than once has come in and said, guess what? I used the ready list in this situation. Right. Should we practice that right now?
Sure.
Okay.
You can do that.
So as we've talked about, the ready list is an introduction to and based upon the principles of the work of F.M. Alexander. It's a body-mind educational paradigm that helps us to have emotional intelligence based on being connected with our body, like in a very specific way. So if we simply take a moment to pause or stop, that gives us a chance to reset. It's just like a stop sign or a stoplight. It says pay attention. So let's pay attention. Stop sign says look both ways. Stop in the ready list. Okay, am I seeing? So I'm looking out this big window, looking around my office here. This is exteroception, E-X-T-E-R-O. It's a kind of perception, externally connecting with my surroundings. The next part of the ready list, am I breathing? Interoception, getting a sense of what's happening inside of my body. Oh, is my breathing shallow? Is my breathing deep? Am I holding my breath? No, I'm going to yawn because that's what happens. And yawning is always a good thing. So stop. Am I seeing? Am I breathing? We've connected with the outside world. We're connecting with ourselves. Now I'm going to give myself a little postural direction so that I can sit upright a little bit more easily. Can I let my head float up so I can be soft and tall? So I'm sitting in the chair, I'm grounded, my feet are on the floor, and my head can float up, my spine can be long, and I can be soft and tall. So stop.
And the shoulders melting like chocolate. Because that to me, that's I'm like this often and I don't realize it until I do the ready list. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And then I feel it.
That's right. That's right. So we've started teaching, especially the little ones. I don't know that I'm going to get much success with using movement or the hand gestures with a 15-year-old. But with the younger kids, what we say is we stop. Am I seeing? Am I breathing? Can I be soft and tall? And these gestures were actually kind of inspired by one of the pioneers, Sue Mary in the UK, who's a co-founder of Educare Small School, where the Alexander technique is integrated into all the daily activities. This wonderful school for kids, I think ages like 4 to 8. But the kids came up with the name The Ready List. It started out as is the balance questions, it's the 3 questions. But the kids came up with these gestures to see, breathe, and I love this, soft and tall.
Yeah.
And so then we can just kind of sit back and say, okay, what is happening within? What's happening without? Now, how do I engage?
Right.
And time again, I hear kids and adults say, yeah, it does help me concentrate. Earlier this week, a high school student told me it helped her before an exam. I hear that over and over again.
Yep.
That the ready list helps kids before exams. So that's a more upstairs brain function. And if our downstairs brain, if our primary developmental and postural reflexes are as finely integrated as possible, and it's not about having perfection, it's about what is the maximal potential for this child at this moment in their life, then we layer on perhaps the principles of the Alexander technique with a solid integrated reflex foundation. Now you've got a kid who's ready to go out and be in love with the world and be happy and successful.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. And I'm going to give a plug for your friend's book, The Labyrinth of Tao.
The Labyrinth of Gar.
Of Gar, of Gar.
That's right.
Okay, A Labyrinth
That's
of
right.
Gar, which Hannah loved, and it's using the ready list, and it's such a great book. I think that was the turning point for her on using the ready list
Wonderful. Wonderful.
because of, like she saw, like, oh wait, when they used the ready list, the ideas came. So that's a great book. So and I'm watching time, and I know we could talk about this stuff forever, all day long. I love it. So what, for people, parents out there that are listening, they're like, I wonder if my child would benefit from this. What are some signs or some symbols, or is this like your child can benefit from it, you can benefit from it, everybody needs it?
True, but we all have limitations and times in terms of time, money, resources, energy, right?
Right.
So for kids who are really anxious, or for kids who are just not participating, right? For kids who maybe have tried modalities that are more cognitively based, not every kid wants to talk to a therapist. A lot of behavioral stuff is coming from simply a brain that doesn't feel safe in the world. If we can help a child, again, I just can't stress this enough. You've heard me say this over and over again. We learn, I'm just going to backtrack to answer your question, Francie. We learn through movement, both in utero and from the moment we're born. We're crawling, we're grabbing, right? You remember when your kids were little tiny babies, you didn't wear dangly earrings.
Nope.
They grab them and
And the
pull
hair.
them out. That's right. You see something shiny, we see something, we want it. Early human development, 1, 2, 3-year-olds is all about moving. We learn about our world, we learn about our body, we stick our foot in our mouth, we put our hands on our mouth, we're exploring. We learn with movement.
Right.
That never stops.
Makes sense.
And then we send kids. Kindergarten is usually a little bit of a balance of, sitting at a table and play. But all of a sudden, first grade comes around and kids are expected to go. And there's no longer an acknowledgement that movement is an inherent, not important, inherent part of learning and feeling safe in the world. So if there's a kid who doesn't have good posture, sure, they can benefit from reflex integration. But if there's a kid who can't sit still, who can't focus, who melts down in a new situation, who is very tense, who's overly shy or overly aggressive, a kid that's being kind of a little bit too aggressive with their peers is a kid that needs some help, right? I mean, we label them bullies and there's all this school intervention stuff, but at the very deepest part, that's a kid that's not feeling safe. So milestones are important. I mean, if, crawling and walking needs to happen, between that 9 to 12, 13-month range. If kids are either really early or really late, I think a reflex integration assessment is always a good idea, because then you're heading things off earlier in the game rather than waiting for things to develop later on. But if a parent is struggling and they're not getting the support they need from their own healthcare providers for the child, that's a really good time to find a reflex integration specialist, usually an occupational therapist or a physical therapist like myself, who's trained to do these assessments and then trained to help these reflexes not get suppressed, but integrated.
Right.
And that's a really important thing. These reflexes are the building blocks. And so we want to integrate them so that they're set up shop in our brain and our body, and they're there to serve us.
And it's so funny you say that, because Hannah was a delayed walker and a delayed talker. And,
she's bright and vivacious, and she's a great normal little kid. And that's the thing is if we, kids need, dare I say, labels to get resources, which is a completely different conversation, as you know, in your world.
Yep.
But Yes. I mean, all of us can benefit from an assessment to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. And I think that for parents who have the means to help their kids in that way, that's great. And I think that movement work with a PT or an OT is essential for any kid doing psychotherapy, for any kid doing any other interventions. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Because
Right.
my work is going to facilitate the work of all the other healthcare professionals, whether it's a tutor or a psychotherapist.
Right. Because it's the internal.
That's right.
And so I know you only work with double digits, right? 10 and above.
Yeah.
Generally? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So that people know. And then, but you said OTs and PTs, and to look for people that do reflex integration.
Yes.
And
so
that
the Masgutovamethod.com is the website where your viewers can find a practitioner in their neck of the woods. Yeah.
Oh, perfect. So we'll have that link when this fully airs, it is fully published.
Terrific.
So how can people, so if they're like, oh, great, my kid's over 10, how can people get in touch with you? What's the best way?
You can give me a call at 202-223-4943. You can also email me. You can go to my website, certainly, Gabrielle Czaja, all one word, .com. And then my email is gabrielle@gabrielleczaja.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on the show again and talk about all of this, because now I understand it more of what we're doing. And I'm happy to get this information out there to parents that are struggling they don't know what to do. And now we have some.
Yeah. We do. I mean, parents should never feel alone. And I'm just another wellness healthcare provider out there to help a parent make parenting easier when their kids are struggling. Yeah.
And thank you.
Thanks, Francie.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. You can always learn more and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not